Let's talk more about the canvas object in Unity's UI system. So I'm going to start by creating a brand new one. I'm going to right click here and I'm going to go to UI canvas. Remember that a canvas is the base of your UI system. You can think of each canvas as sort of being like its own user interface, its own menu in your game. Every single heads-up display, the overlay on top of your game window, it should all be an individual canvas, right? So I right clicked that created canvas and it created two things for me. One is my canvas object. If I move my mouse over to my scene view and hit F, I can go to the full size of this canvas, which looks like this. It's empty right now, there's nothing in it. And then the other thing it created for me was this event system. Every single canvas that you want to sort of interact with, that you want to be able to click on the elements within it, needs to have this event system. By default, there's an event system on it as well as a standalone input. And for most projects, you don't even need to touch this. All you need to know is the event system needs to be here side by side with the canvas. If you ever run into a situation where you can't click on your buttons, on any of your buttons, or interact with your UI at all, you should double check that your canvas or that there is an event system in your scene. All right, let's take a look more at this canvas object. So I'm going to square it up by hitting this 2D button. I'm going to make sure that my 2D UI tool is selected as well. All right, on this canvas, I'm going to right click. I'm going to create a new UI panel. A panel is just an object that has an image component on it. It's sort of used as like a way to sort of like organize your hierarchy and within your UI. If you were building like an inventory window, you might build it as like its own little panel. So I might have like an inventory screen over here. I'm just going to duplicate it and create another one down here. So if I had like my hotbar for my abilities, if I had my UI window that I wanted to pop up in this area, and then say I had like, when I hit C, I want to see like my player pop up over here, and this is where I would like equip things. These would probably all be independent panels. So, and remember, you always want to stay organized here. So, this first panel might be my inventory. I'm just going to rename them. The second panel will be my hotbar. And this third panel here will be my character window, right? So panels are just used to organize your UI, right, into these different things. And now within this inventory, I can start adding more UI panels or adding buttons, right? My hotbar might be a collection of buttons. So let's go ahead and do UI and let's create a new button. They default to look like this. And I'm just going to resize this thing just for now, just so we get something in our canvas that we're looking at. All right. So I'm just going to duplicate this, create a couple buttons here. In the future, maybe this will be some abilities that I want to click on, or, if I'm building an RPG game, it could be the items that I have equipped or whatever it may be. Another great thing about working with panels is that you can enable and disable these, one at a time selectively. So if by default, your game might look like this, where you just see your hotbar, and then your character hits I for the inventory, and then your job and your scripts and your logic in your game is to essentially toggle this object on so they can see their inventory, and then when they hit I again, or B or whatever, or escape to close it, you toggle this object back off, right? Okay. This canvas here is set up as a screen space overlay. So let's enable all these objects and let's talk more about this canvas component now that we have something here. So remember, my scene actually looked like this if I go back to my 3D view instead of my 2D view, just by unselecting this 2D icon, right? And I'm going to grab my main camera and I'm going to position it so it looks right here. Sure, this looks fine. Align with view. And if I go to my game view, it's going to look identical, except it has my user interface overlaid on top of it, right? So this is one of the three main modes that canvases can be in. So my canvas object in the canvas component right now is set up as a screen space overlay. That means that this canvas is going to be rendered on top of whatever the camera is looking at. The camera may be looking at this, but right before it gets drawn on your screen, this canvas, because it is set as screen space overlay, is going to get rendered on top of it, right? So what we're seeing is this user interface overlaid on top of your game. This is the first mode that canvases can be in. The second mode that canvases can be in. If I change the screen space overlay to screen space camera, and then it's going to ask for a camera for me to connect it. So I'm just going to connect my main camera. Cool. Notice how it's positioned my canvas to somewhere else in the world. right? So it's no longer that giant canvas that was way up here. Now it's sort of at this like strange, awkward angle, right? We can better see what this is doing if we actually look at our camera and we look at the view frustum. So the view frustum of our camera is the area that our camera is like currently looking at. And if I change the angle of my camera, you can kind of see what the user interface is doing. You know, that canvas is matching itself up with the camera and sort of lining itself up. So in the game, it might not look that different, right? It's still overlaid as if it's right in front of the camera, but notice how this sphere is actually on top of my character window now, right? So the canvas mode that I've set to now, the screen space camera, has a depth associated with it, right? Which is what this plane distance is. I can adjust this plane distance and adjust how near or far the user interface is from my camera, right? So if I put it really close and I look at my game, my user interface is going to be on top of my objects. If I adjust this to be something greater, you can see at some point, you know, the objects in my scene are on top of it. This might be the type of user interface where you want to have something locked to the camera, but you want to have 3D objects in your scene that are overlaid on top of it. Think of something like the cockpit for a ship that you're inside of, right? The cockpit might be something that's overlaid on top of most of your game scenes, but then sometimes you're going to have particle effects and explosions and things that you want to go on top of your cockpit and be sort of displayed above those UI windows. So this is the second mode that a canvas can be set in. The third mode, I'm going to go reset my camera so it's not this strange angle. The third mode that our canvas can be set in is a really cool one. The third mode is this world space. So the world space canvas, the interesting thing about this is notice how it still is at a funky orientation in the world, right? So here's my canvas object right here. But the interesting thing about this now is that it is no longer locked to the position or orientation of our camera, right? So look at our game window here, right? Or look at my camera preview over here. If I move my camera off to the side, right, you can see that my, it's just sort of like my UI is just something that's there in the scene, right? It's just another object that's there in the scene, right? So this camera, like a world space camera or a world space canvas, is used for any sort of UI elements that you want to be just in your scene. This is the type of thing that you would use. So I'll disable this canvas and I'll create another one really quick just to show you a really good example. So if I had like a health bar canvas, and inside this health bar, I'm going to create a, let's see, what am I going to put here? I'm just going to put a, let's see, I'm just going to put a panel in it for now. If I can find it, there we go. All right, so here's my health bar canvas. It's really big right now because it's set as screen space overlay. I'm going to set it as world space. And then after I set it as world space, I'm going to take this and put it underneath my cube, right? So now my canvas is actually a child of a 3D game object, right? I'm going to decrease the width of this thing. Let's just make it like 100 by 100, right? Let's set its position as 0, 0, 0. And let's go take a look at this cube, right? So here's my canvas. And I'm going to go back to my UI tools where I can position this thing, right? And I could take this panel and I could sort of position it like this. Ooh, messing up my anchors and stuff here. My pivot points. And I could position it like this. And now my cube has a UI element on top of it. So as my cube moves around, through my scene, it has something floating over its head. This is exactly how you do floating combat text that pops off the top where it says how much damage you dealt and it sort of floats off the top of enemies' heads or your own head. This is how you do health bars. This is how you do anything that's attached to a game object. You would create as a world space canvas, and then you can child it underneath an object. You can add this to prefabs as well. So if you have enemy prefabs, you can put their health bars as a canvas underneath those prefabs, and they all get them. So really cool canvas modes here. So we have screen space overlay. It overlays itself on top of the rendered scene. Screen space camera. it's overlaying itself, but actually has a depth associated with it. So you can have 3D objects on top of it. And then you have the world space setting as well, which means that it's just another 3D object somewhere in your scene.